Are you familiar with the story of the monkey's paw? It originated as a tale made in 1902 by W. Jacobs as part of his short stories collection, The Lady of the Barge. The tale is about this mystical artifact, a severed hand of a monkey that is said to be able to grant wishes. Every time a wish is made, a finger curls. However, what makes the monkey's paw stand out from all the other wish granters is how it also comes with a serious price. A consequence that ultimately leaves the user much worse than before they made the wish. It is one of the most well-known examples of teaching people to be careful what they wish for. Now, you might be wondering, why am I talking about the monkey's paw in the first place? Well, how else would you explain the existence of what we know today as Space Jam: A New Legacy?
You have no idea how much Warner Brothers tried for years to make that elusive Space Jam sequel. Say what you will about the original Space Jam, you can either love it or hate it, but you can't deny how it was one of Warner Brothers' biggest movies of the 1990s. In fact, as of this review, it still stands as the highest grossing basketball movie of all time that A New Legacy might break. And with the huge amount of money they made, especially from all the merchandising, the studio obviously wanted to make another. But there was just one problem. Its star player, Michael Jordan, said,
"No."
And that just made things completely complicated for the Warners. Following afterwards, they were just scrambling for ways to capitalize on Space Jam without the need of Jordan. They thought about spin-offs that would have the Looney Tunes find themselves racing, spying, skateboarding, or even golfing. However, the best they came up was the 2003 movie Looney Tunes Back in Action, which was directed by beloved filmmaker and Space Jam hater Joe Dante. But since that was a bomb that blew bigger than a Tex Avery gag, all hope was pretty much lost for that Space Jam sequel. And then, fast forwarding to 2014, a new player was drafted. Enter NBA All-Star LeBron James, who signed on with the WB to try to revive the idea of a Space Jam 2. Then, a year later, when he and his own film studio, Spring Hill Entertainment, made a deal with the Warners after his acclaimed appearance in Trainwreck, James went on to make the impossible happen and finally bring the Looney Tunes characters back in the court for a whole new generation.
King James.
As a 90s kid myself, I actually was part of that generation that was introduced to the Looney Tunes through the whole Space Jam craze. And that actually is a major reason why nowadays Space Jam has a huge cult following. Because many of those fans that are my age are forever grateful for Space Jam because that is where they were introduced to such beloved characters like Bugs, Daffy, Porky, Sylvester, and many, many more, and what ultimately led them to that rabbit hole of seeing all the legendary cartoons. Me, on the other hand, though, I'm gonna be honest, I never really cared for Space Jam as a movie, even back when I was a kid. Of course, I love the Looney Tunes as much as the next animation fan, but I just never really had that much interest in sports to begin with. Well, except for hockey, because I am Canadian and, well, go Habs go. And let's be honest here, Space Jam is a gimmick movie. Nobody watches it because they want to see Oscar-worthy writing or anything like that. People just want to see cartoons play basketball with Michael Jordan. I mean, what else do you expect out of a movie that was literally based on a commercial?
Things seem bleak for our heroes. Wait, a giant pencil with an equally giant eraser. Our heroes have made the world safe for truth, justice,
and Mike's royalty checks from Nike.
But 25 years later, Warner Brothers finally got their wish for their Space Jam sequel. It finally came true. And I do get why there are people out there who would be excited for this, mainly because of nostalgic purposes and stuff like that. But I'll admit that I did not come in with high expectations for this one. And as it turns out, it certainly did feel like watching Space Jam all over again. Problems and all.
Just like the first Space Jam, the prime focus of it all is to see the Looney Tunes team up with a popular NBA player to go against a group of monsters in a basketball game. Everything else is mostly meaningless or meant to build up to that pinnacle moment. The closest thing there is to a story here is the relationship between LeBron and his fictionalized son, Dom, whose bond is being broken apart by James trying to push a basketball career to his son while Dom's true passion is making video games. Already, just from that synopsis alone, you could easily tell what is the outcome of this narrative, starting out with the pure resentment, which ultimately leads to understanding and reconnecting. There's nothing that it does to twist the narrative to make it unexpected and unique, or to enhance it to make it more engaging. It's the same bland and repetitive plotline of the father-son scenario trying to settle their differences to bond. But what makes this story fail hard is that LeBron is a despicable father in the film. Of course, Dom would want to get away from him because of how he's so selfish and just wants his son to be like him and be all serious and disciplined in basketball. It also makes it worse when the movie keeps on stroking his ego and really emphasizing the whole King James brand with how he's the best in the league. It doesn't help either when the acting doesn't dunk as well as the balls in the court. I get that there are times when James can be a solid actor, but this is not a great example of his skills, since he and his fake son Dom often feel so disinterested to be a part of the movie. And a factor why it's hard to care about their bonding is because they don't even show that they care either.
Bet Will Smith ain't got to deal with this.
Dom!
What in the Matrix hell?
And they aren't the only bad actors here. On top of the underacting, there's also some overacting from people like Don Cheadle who think that just because this is a Looney Tunes movie, they're allowed to be as over the top as they can. Don't get me wrong, those performances can sometimes be fun like in Back in Action, but there is no amount of hamming it up from the villain that could save him from the hopeless writing. The only person I'd say who did a good acting job outside of the veteran voice actors is Zendaya as Lola, and she was treated more as just one of the tunes on the side. But if there is one thing that does make the plot pretty aggravating to sit through, is the message of being yourself and have fun. Don't get me wrong, they are good messages in themselves, but it's a lot less fun when the movie keeps on forcefully hammering it in and make it so obvious that the way to save the day is for LeBron to let go of his seriousness for basketball and just have fun, and to let his son be himself so he could reconnect with him again. How ironic for a movie to tell me to let me be myself when all it's trying to do so hard is to be just like its predecessor.
You got amazing potential on the court, and I can help you get there.
That's not what I want, Dad. You never let me do what I want to do. You never let me just do me.
I know that I'm so far sounding like a complete hater of both this and the original Space Jam. Like, I'm pretty much acting like Joe Dante and Chuck Jones over here. But if I can take a moment to actually give some credit to the original Space Jam, I will say that the animation is great. In fact, I would even go as far and say that it is one of the best examples of blending hand-drawn animation with live action. But when it comes to A New Legacy, however, I will say that the best thing about the movie is that the animation is good. Not great, but it is good.
Regardless if people love it or hate it, the most praised aspect of the first Space Jam was the animation. How it replicated the style of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but elevated it with the latest technology at the time to create this immersive experience of Michael Jordan playing basketball in the Looney Tunes world. In A New Legacy, they decided to go with a more different approach, mostly keeping the hand-drawn and live action separate in order to also implement a strong amount of CG. And like I said before, the animation is good, but there is a noticeable downgrade compared to before. I'll give it credit that, with the 2D parts, I get what it wanted to do, and it is pretty clever to make LeBron also a cartoon to fit himself in the Toon world. But I don't know if it's just me, but but there's something about the craftsmanship in the hand-drawn that doesn't have that same finesse as the first. Don't get me wrong, it is still good, I really like it, and it is nice to see mainstream animation return to the classic medium this way. But I can't help but find that there is a minor downgrade from masterclass to a good job.
A dream team. Ma'am, shoot the ball. Let's try that again, shall we?
But it's not just the 2D that is well done. Even the CG has its great moments, and there are times when the team at WAG really gave it their all. This is especially the case with the backgrounds to create the Warner Brothers serververse, developing this massive environment filled with many of Warner Brothers' most prominent IPs and tons of their recognizable characters as they all spectate the biggest sporting event in pop culture. I can't deny it, as dreadfully predictable as this may be, at least the animation with all of its effects and zaniness does make the game interesting to watch, as they bend the common rules of basketball to let out the Looney Tunes' crazy nature and the Goon Squad's special abilities. However, if I do have to criticize something here, it's that the CG look isn't best suited for the Looney Tunes. I get it, this is not their first time in the third dimension, but considering how a good chunk of the movie is spent in their new style, it becomes a bit uncomfortably uncanny to see these characters that we've known for decades as 2D cartoons now adapted in CG with realistic textures and blurs in their movements. It's not the fault of the animators, they did the best they could with this, but it could have helped if they were a little more stylized to ease them onto computer animation than to throw them in with a look that's meant to seem partially real.
Every time I'm out in public, people asking me for pics. Nobody knows you when you walk the street. How your last name, rhythm, and you're still off beat. From beginning to the...
But speaking of the serververse, that's probably the biggest criticism that people are giving to Space Jam: A New Legacy. That this is all just one big commercial for Warner Brothers, and it's an indirect way to go and promote HBO Max. Now, I do get it. I do understand why people are giving out that criticism with the way that they've been handling all their other properties in this movie. But if I may go and put my piece onto this, I honestly feel like there actually is some legitimate potential that they could have done with this whole idea of making this Warner Brothers serververse.
I get it. It can be frustrating to see some giant studio like Warner Brothers flaunting their capitalism by presenting their eclectic collection of prominent franchises. But, to be fair, it could have been handled so much worse. I'd even say that they were more shameless about how LeBron James is the king more than their own IPs. If anything, their purpose is more for the sake of world building than some emoji movie style advertising. And there are ways that this could have really worked, especially with the idea of how almost all the characters moved out to other WB properties to live their lives. It could have actually been fun to see these types of crossovers and give the Looney Tunes tons of materials to play with in their new environments. Seriously, am I the only one that feels like the whole movie would have been better if we took out all the basketball stuff and have it be just about this?
So many different worlds to explore. I can't wait to see what I turn into here. I'm freaking Robin?
Nerd alert.
But here's the problem that makes it all fall flat. The movie doesn't really do anything with it. Considering how it desperately wants this basketball game more than anything else, all these world-building ideas are reduced to nothing more but quick montages to build up to that moment, or just pointless cameos. In a way, having all these other Warner Brothers IPs serve no purpose to the plot. I know that this is another movie that is often thrown into this IP mashup category, but take a look at Ralph Breaks the Internet. Say what you will about this feature, but at least its main intentions are to tell an actual story and build this complex dynamic between its leads. And even if Disney had its little moment of showing off all their properties with the Oh My Disney scene, it does have a point to the narrative, and the princesses play a vital role in the development of Vanellope. A New Legacy, on the other hand, doesn't care about plot, doesn't care about character development other than LeBron being a bad father, doesn't care about supplying actual good humor, and doesn't care about explaining anything. All these cameos and references are just filler to give audiences something to notice before being ready for the big game. They're nothing but distractions from the matter that the movie has no story or even something of substance to latch onto because it just wants to play basketball. The reason why many are accusing this of being a commercial is because the movie itself didn't provide the references a purpose.
However, with all the problems that I may have with it, I honestly can't really be mad at this movie because, at the end of the day, this is a Space Jam sequel. This is the movie that people have been anticipated for years to go and actually see. And they have been wishing for it for so long, for 25 years in fact, until one day someone decided to go and wish on a monkey's paw in order to make that come true. Did you want to see another Space Jam? Did you want another movie just like that? Well, here it is! You finally got your wish!
And since this is a Space Jam sequel, what else did you expect? An awfully predictable plot that almost doesn't exist, bad acting, especially from the lead basketball player, pointless pop culture references, and too much emphasis on a simple gimmick that isn't even worth revolving an entire movie over. Space Jam: A New Legacy stays faithful to its predecessor so it could still be as unpleasantly flawed. While it is far from the worst thing Warner Bros. Produced, since it does have some good animation both in 2D and 3D, and it does have some strong concepts of this entire Warner Bros. Universe, the terrible execution of it all makes the entire experience feel like a waste of opportunity and a waste of time. This is a case where you must know what you're in for to find some enjoyment. If you want to go in and want to like it, then you probably will. Otherwise, if you treat it like any other movie, then you'll be stuck with one of the Looney Tunes' worst adventures. Overall, this is just a 4 out of 10 movie and gets the Animat seal of garbage. I mean, it's Space Jam. What were you expecting? A good movie?
It really is a case where you have to be in the right mindset in order to be more positive towards this movie. Like, you can't come in thinking that you want to see a movie, but rather you want to see specifically Space Jam. You want to see the basketball game. You want to see the Looney Tunes characters play ball. You want to see all those different WB references. And if you want all that, then great. Chances are you can actually go in and you might actually end up liking it. All I'm doing here is doing my job as a critic and judging the movie for what it is, a movie. And you cannot look at it that way, because otherwise, you'll just end up with LeBron James's garbage. Regardless if you end up liking it or not, I'm just gonna say this. I know there are a lot of people who did wish for a Space Jam sequel. However, at the end of the day, you really gotta go and be careful with what you wish for. Otherwise, you might get it. See you later, dudes.